Hi, and welcome to this Tech Pathways London interview. My name is Caitlin McMillan, Project Manager of Tech Pathways London, and I'm here today with Scott Riseborough. Hi, Scott.
Hi, how you doing, Caitlin?
I'm all right, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. Always better on a Friday.
Ah, love it, love it. Yes, we are recording this on a Friday in January lockdown. So we are speaking via Zoom from two undisclosed locations across the UK. So Scott, could you introduce yourself and tell us what you do for a living?
Sure. So my name's Scott Riseborough. I work in software. The reason I leave that as pretty general is because I do quite a few different things. I'm currently a freelance QA consultant working for a couple of different clients in a couple of different industries. And I'm also CTO and co-founder of Raincheck UK, which is a weather API provider, which was a business venture that was started between contracts in lockdown.
Brill. So is it all right if we break down a couple of those things? So could you talk
Absolutely.
me through what QA is?
Sure. So quality assurance, test engineering, people call it a couple of different things across the industry, but it's basically assuring that software meets the required standards for the client is the way I would describe it. It comprises a number of different parts. So the developers on the whole will be mostly responsible for writing the code and making sure and then QAs are responsible for making sure it is functionally compliant for the client's needs. And this constitutes a couple of different things. So firstly, it's, does the software behave in the way that we're expecting? Then does the software behave in the way the client is expecting? And is the software performant? Is it secure? And there's a number of different steps along the road to making sure that software is of a sufficient quality for a client. We have a number of different ways of assessing that as well. There are manual test methods to actually just kind of go in and use the software like a customer would. There are automated test methods as well, where you can write a suite of automated tests which run against either a production-like instance, so something, a website, say, running actually on the web, or you can have your own little isolated environments, test and staging environments, they tend to be called, which we run our tests against before things are pushed up live to make sure everything works correctly. So the goal of the QA is to break it before the customer does, and then fix it before it goes live.
Love that. Professionally breaking things.
That is. I'm tempted to have that kind of, either not tattooed on me, but maybe put up on the studio in here, professionally breaking things.
So how did you get to where you are today?
That's a good question. I had no idea what I wanted to do when I left uni. Well, I suppose I should start at what I did at uni. So I'm a physics grad, and I loved my course. I very much enjoyed the problem-solving aspect of physics and maths in general. And I got to the end of my degree and was thinking, right, where to go now? Because I knew I didn't want to stay in academia. The problem with a physics degree is that although it was very enjoyable, it doesn't lead you into any career at all, like architecture or medicine or law. And so for quite a while, I was a bit stuck as to what I wanted to do. I was convinced I didn't want to get into software. I'd done a couple of modules in C when I was at university and hated them. And so because of that, was convinced that I didn't want anything to do with software at all. And as time went on, I realized that software is kind of where science happens in the real world. Just the nature and the complexity of things now, like every scientist needs to be able to code to some extent, whether it's just in MATLAB or whether you're getting kind of right down into some deeper languages. And it was just speaking with a recruiter about 6 months after I'd left uni, who really sat down with me and made me realize what I enjoyed about my degree, which was analytical problem solving, essentially. And she asked me if I'd ever considered test engineering. I was like, I don't know what that is. And so I got my first job with Cisco initially as a manual test engineer with them. And very quickly then realized the power of automation. Button clicking becomes very repetitive very quickly. And so you want to find a way to automate that. And did a couple of courses in Python as part of my work there. And that's what kind of set me on the road to where I am today. So I've worked for a couple of different clients over the years in a couple of different industries. I've networking, banking, law, music, TV and media. I'm trying to think if there's any others in there. AI. There's a couple of. I feel like I've got quite a broad range now, which is then why 2 years ago I decided to take the plunge and set up my own company and become a freelance QA consultant. Initially, I was specializing in law. So I worked for 2.5 years as head of test for a legal tech startup called Aperio, and very much loved my time there. But then and realized that the changing landscape in the legal space as well, and really wanted to be part of that. But unfortunately, then obviously, as we all know, last year lockdown hit, and lots of funding to especially in legal tech just disappeared. So I found myself out of a job for a short period. Which is, I'm not one to kind of sit there and rest idly. And so I decided to set up my own company with a friend from university, which was RainCheck. And that was basically taking all of my years of Python programming and really putting them to the test and creating our first website. So we've created our first website, raincheck.wedding, which is a wedding weather website predictor. And essentially you can go in and using 50 years of the last Met Office data, it will give you an indication of what the weather will be like on a particular day in a particular postcode for your wedding. It's just the first example of the power of the engine we've created behind this. And we are slowly looking to other industries as to where we can take this going forward. And so, yeah, that kind of brings us up to today.
Can you talk us through what digital skills you use on a daily basis?
On a daily basis. Okay, so for the majority of the time, I work in Python. I certainly found it over the years. I've coded in a few different languages, so JavaScript, Java, C, and Python. And after using all of those, I would say, certainly from a test engineering point of view, Python seems to be the most flexible. And it's certainly I'm coding in Python on a daily basis. JavaScript is good as well. Very, very good from a kind of like front-end coding perspective. It's not something I'm terribly interested in, though. I'm still very much focused on the QA side of things, so I try and avoid that wherever possible. But I would say that's the majority of the kind of tech I use throughout the day in terms of coding. I think lockdown has really emphasized the need for communication tools and the use of them as well. So as a freelance contractor, I'm either traveling a lot or I'm working remotely a lot of the time as well. And maintaining constant lines of communication between yourself and the clients is incredibly important. So some sort of instant messaging, whether it's Microsoft Teams or Slack, I use on a daily basis. Personally, I prefer Slack. Just has a little bit more of a fun element to it. It's a little bit less corporate. Although saying that, they've just been bought by Salesforce, so we'll see how long that lasts. Then very much, Zoom we use quite a lot as well. Google Meet. There's so many video conferencing platforms now that have really scaled up in the wake of lockdown. I don't have a personal preference for any of them, to be safe. I'd say the ease of Google Meet, in terms of, because I have a Gmail account, makes it quite easy to talk with people. But certainly the quality of Zoom is amazing. Email, I try and use email less and less as time goes on now, especially, again, in the wake of lockdown and working remotely more often. It's quite good for if you want sort of a long-winded explanation or handovers, or if you want something that you don't necessarily want a quick response on. But I feel I've worked in too many places where email is essentially used in the way that an instant message tool should be used, where people are responding, quick, long threads and very quick responses on things. And it's just not an effective tool for that. But it definitely still has its place, I would say. But I tend to use it less and less as time is going on. Then what else? Obviously I run my own business, so I have my accountancy software and my time roll software that I need to be running. I'm usually working multiple contracts at the same time. So I need to keep a very careful eye over which projects I'm spending time on. So I currently have 3 active contracts. And yeah, when I switch between them, I use Free Agent to basically keep a track of my time on each one. And then that just makes invoicing at the end of the month much easier then. I do also work before lockdown, I was working as a musician as well. For those that work in the industry know that musicians are having a tougher time than most, I would say, right now. And especially personally working as a vocalist and a beatboxer, no one wants to be professionally spat at right now. So it's, there's a few things, but obviously I have a whole suite of tools related to recording and publishing my videos as part of my business as well.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about that. That's an excellent segue into your sort of other career as and Scott's doing himself down a little bit there, saying, you know, oh yeah, I do a bit of music. You are in fact am I right in thinking is it a former Welsh loop beatboxing champion?
I'm former UK, current Welsh.
Former UK.
So
Sorry.
so I mean, if people want to zoom in on the posters behind that I've got in pride of place in the studio. So I won the UK Beatbox Championships for the loop station category in 2015, and I'm the double Welsh title holder as well.
In terms of that, could you talk us through some of the tech that you use to do your beatboxing?
Sure. I mean, most of it's around me here. I've got a set of studio monitors each side of my screen here, which I won't lift up because they're incredibly heavy. I've got my SM7B microphone, which is my little baby. I love this thing. The sound quality on this is incredible for working in a studio. Then in terms of the tech that I use, I try to keep as free as possible. So with vocal work and beatboxing, I tend to either be laying just pure vocal lines down or trying to keep things as a cappella as possible without too much processing. So there's no huge need for a lot of very expensive processing software or mixing software. So I use GarageBand because I work on a Mac. I do have was previously on Windows as well and was using Mixcraft, which is a very cheap recording option as well, and find that's perfectly good for my use. I have a very simple interface, USB interface, which is a Behringer Euphoria, and that's kind of all I need for most of the work I do. And I try and do a lot of tutorials as well when I do workshops and things to explain that you don't need a huge amount of recording equipment to get a decent sound. As if you've got a good microphone and a fairly good space to record in, the software side of things is definitely second to that.
What advice, both in terms of kind of skills to gain and maybe tech to have a go at, would you give to a young person who's looking at what you do and going, yeah, I fancy a go at that?
Sure. So from the software engineering standpoint, the first thing I would say is don't be intimidated by people who've done a lot of courses or a lot of or have done, say, a computing engineering university course. My experience is that once you're a couple of years into the industry, the distinction is negligible between people who've done computer science and people who've done a subject that didn't do much. I admittedly did physics, which is a STEM subject, but as I said, I did maybe 1-2 courses using C, which I've never used since because I hated it, and was convinced that I didn't want to be involved in software after I left university. And it's moving into that industry has been the best decision I've ever made. But yeah, don't be into the only difference I would say after a couple of years is people who've done, say, a comp sci degree understand the why behind certain things, like why things are done in a certain way. But in terms of practical application, there's no difference. And I've worked with people who've done, maths and engineering degrees. I've worked with people who've done English and history degrees, who have all been equivalent competency when it comes to coding. So that's probably the first bit of advice I would give. The second bit of advice I would give is there are so many courses available online. If you just use Google for finding a Python course and look at the reviews and the recommendations around there. There's not a specific course I would recommend, but Python is a good first language to start in. The idea of it is that it's very human readable and it's very easy to understand, and it works on virtually every computer in the world. It doesn't take up much, you don't need anything special to compile it or write it. You can do it straight from a command line if you want to. But yeah, Python is a great segue into coding, I would say. So yeah, Python, and don't be intimidated by people who seem to have done more than you.
Love that. Don't be intimidated by people who seem to have done more than you. That is a brilliant piece of advice to end on. Scott, thank you ever so much for your time today.
No, thank you very much for having me.